You will start with the first step of getting connected with target prospects. Now, as you look at accounts or businesses that you're trying to get into or trying to sell your software to, you might look at an organization and think, well, I want to sell to the decision maker. So a VP of the department, maybe the VP of IT is a good place, and try to get into the account. Now that's a good place to start. And if you've sold enterprise software at all, you know that the VP of IT is a very difficult person to get a hold of or to get engaged with. And you're going to run into a lot of voicemail boxes and dead end roads. So that is what it is. I mean, that's sort of the landscape that you're operating in. But what you can do when you can't get a hold of the VP of IT or whatever department you're calling into, you can move up and down the organization. So try to call the person that they report to, such as the CIO. Now, of course, if the VP of IT is hard to get a hold of, I'm not saying that the CIO is going to be any easier, but when you increase the number of people that you're trying to reach at a particular account, you increase the odds of getting a hold of somebody and increase the odds of getting in. Another thing you can do is move down the organization to the director level. Call the director of IT. As you move down, these people are actually more accessible, easier to get a hold of, but those people will have less power and less authority. So that's something to take into consideration. Although the people lower in the organization have very valuable information that you can extract as you meet with them and try to build your business case as to either why they need what you sell or to try to qualify them to determine if they in fact need what you sell. But as you move up and down the organization to try to find another way in, we call this vertical movement. So you're vertically moving throughout the organization up and down to try to reach additional contacts. And if you sell enterprise software, probably you're trying to call IT. And because in most cases, IT is often the department that purchases the software or manages the software. So you often think, well, I sell software, so I need to sell to IT. But most likely there are multiple departments that you can sell into. For example, sure, you sell software, but it's the operations department, for example, that might actually use the software or need the software. It's the operations department or the finance department or the HR department that creates the business need for the software. The IT department does not say, oh, let's go out and figure out what software to buy. It's the business unit or the functional department that needs the software that then goes to IT and says, we need to buy the software. So it's usually more productive to actually call into the functional area. Not only do the conversations usually become more productive, but those are actually departments that are easier to get into than the calling into IT, because so many people are trying to call into IT. You have hardware vendors, you have software vendors, you have outsourcing companies, you have services companies, staffing companies. So many different types of vendors are trying to call into IT. That's why they never answer their phone or respond to emails. But when you call into operations or call into finance or call into HR, there's less competition, and sometimes those can be easier departments to get into. And so when you find other departments to call into, we also call this horizontal movement. You're moving horizontally throughout the organization, and it's this horizontal movement that can improve your odds of getting into the organization. And so if we look at the whole organization as a whole and just kind of think about what we just talked about there, like I said, let's say that the starting place is, okay, we sell enterprise software, let's try to reach the VP of IT. Of course, we discussed that's difficult. So then when you apply that horizontal and vertical movement, look at all these other people that we can reach out to and try to engage with. And so when you add all these other people to your prospecting, you improve your ability to get your foot in the door, to get connected with somebody. And that's what we're talking about here in this first step of selling enterprise software, which is just simply getting connected. So these are the people we're going after. Now, how are we going to try to reach them and try to connect with them and try to communicate with them? Well, here's a process that I'll share with you that we go into much more detail in another video, but here's what we call a cadence, a rhythm for the different ways to reach out. And it can often start with sending a cold email. Then after we send our cold email, we may do a cold call and try to reach them on the phone. As we've already discussed, some of these people are very hard to get hold of, so it's very likely that we might get voicemail boxes. I recommend, for the most part, not leaving a voicemail so that you can call back again and again. It's my belief that if I don't leave a voicemail, I can call someone every day. So in this first week, we're calling multiple times without leaving a voicemail. And then that takes us to week 2. So we spend a week of calling them multiple times. Now we're in week 2, and if they don't answer our next call, Now we're going to leave a voicemail. We're going to follow up that voicemail with a voicemail follow-up email. And because we just left a voicemail, we're going to pause. We're going to pause for 1 week. Now that takes us to week 3. And guess what? In week 3, we can just go through that same process. I would recommend sending a different email and maybe leaving a different voicemail message, but we can go through that same process. And we can go through that same process. We recommend in our full prospecting cadence going through 4 rounds. And each round is exactly the same in terms of steps, but the messaging might be different for each round. So like I said, I go into much more detail on that in our full training methodology. Now, at the end of this cadence, at the end of round 4, if you go through all these different steps and you're still not able to get a hold of someone, I think that you can confidently say, well, this is someone that I will never get a hold of, so I'm going to spend my time trying to reach other people. At that point, you can begin to walk away. And what I would say is you can either walk away completely and not contact this person anymore, or you could add this person to some sort of email drip. It might be some sort of email automation that drips some sort of email to this person over a period of time. And that's kind of a set it and forget it. You add the contact and you're no longer trying to reach them and they're just getting some sort of periodic email. The other thing that you can do with this prospecting cadence is you could mix in your organizational movement. And let me show you what that looks like. At the end of round 2, this is a great place to add in organizational movement. So let's say that we started at the top with the VP of IT. We go through week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. We're not able to get a hold of them. At that point, add in some organizational movement, either moving to another functional department or moving up and down, maybe calling the director of IT. And so this is a good place to do that. And I personally believe a great place to go is maybe LinkedIn. So you can do some searching on the organization and on the company and find another person. And when you find that other person to reach out to, that person then begins at the top of the cadence. So at this point, you would have 2 people that are working through this process. I personally believe that's a good balance, that you have someone that you're just starting to reach out to and someone that's halfway through the cadence. And by the way, once that first prospect moves to the end of round 4 and you begin to walk away or stop calling them, then you're going to reach organizational movement for the second contact and you find someone else and put them at the top. So I personally believe this is a really balanced approach and it can improve your odds of getting in. And one last thing I want to point out here is as we look at this, we talked about emailing and cold calling and leaving voicemail messages. In this video, we're not going to talk about at all what to say in your emails and how to make cold calls. That's all discussed in our full 2 to 3 day workshop of the Smart Sales System. So if you're looking for that, go over there because those are whole conversations in itself. And so we're just going to skim the surface on that and move on. Okay, at this point, let's assume using that approach, you get engaged with someone. And now as we're either talking to that person on a cold call or in an email, or we're meeting with them, now we need to find a way to make the prospects that we talk to interested. And I personally believe that making prospects interested, specifically when you sell enterprise software, it all starts with trying to communicate with the prospect to answer this question of what's in it for me. Because when you talk about the product and the features and the functionality, that doesn't really answer the question of what's in it for me. And I think this is where a lot of salespeople in general, and often enterprise software salespeople, can get hung up, because we often talk about features and functionality because we have a lot of that knowledge in our head and it's often really cool stuff and we think that the prospect's going to be interested in it, but it's really the benefits that the product delivers that answers the question of what's in it for me. So in order to focus on how to make prospects interested, especially in our short emails and our short conversations, let's focus on communicating what's in it for me by communicating the benefits that the enterprise software can deliver. What we're going to do is we want to minimize how much we talk about the product that you sell and what the product does, and we want to focus on the improvements that the product and feature creates. So I'm going to go through a demo example here of how to really brainstorm and organize the benefits for enterprise software. And I'm going to use a fictitious product here of inventory management software. I've never sold inventory management software. I don't have any knowledge in the space. I just sort of made this up. But I'm going to go through this process to brainstorm benefits and what to say to sell inventory management software. And the process I go through to figure out what to say for inventory management software, you can copy that process and apply it to what you sell to figure out what to say for what you sell. sell. So let's start with thinking about what is it that we're actually selling here. And I just made up 3 features here. These are 3 features of this inventory management software. So there's auto inventory replenishment, and there's predictive demand forecasting, and there's some sort of management dashboard. Of course, there's probably a lot of other features, but we're just going to simplify this and focus on those 3 features. Now, when you communicate the benefits and how those features and that product helps, in most cases, most products and services, especially enterprise software, helps in a few key ways. Usually, software can help to make something work better. It can help to make something easier. It can help to decrease the time it takes to do something. It can increase income or revenue for that customer, that company. It can help your customer that you're selling to decrease their costs or expenses. It can help to decrease risk. It can help to improve visibility or access to information. So these are very common ways that just about every product or service helps. And with that, you can often look at these areas to figure out how your product helps. But let me take you through a brainstorming process here to figure out how to communicate to answer the question of what's in it for me when you sell enterprise software. So our goal here is to brainstorm about 3 to 6 value points. In our methodology, when we talk about benefits, we refer to those as value points. That this term is just interchangeable with benefits. So what we want to do is we want to come up with about 3 to 6 value points. And a starting place that we can do, this is one way that we can go about brainstorming, is we can start with those features and functionality. And what we can do is we can look at each feature and say, well, how does that feature help our customer? And that helps us to answer the question of what's in it for me. How does having software that automatically orders, how does that help our customer? Well, that helps them to decrease the time they spend ordering. Well, if they can use our predictive demand forecasting, how does that help them? Well, that can help them to increase ordering accuracy because they're able to see in the future much better. So they're able to decrease times when they don't order enough and decrease times where they order too much. So it increases ordering accuracy. And the management dashboard, well, how does that help them? Well, the dashboard helps them to have visibility to real-time information. So that answers the question of what's in it for them. So we use this process of looking at features. I'll show you another way real quick, is that another thing that you can do is you can just look at that common improvements list and say, well, do we help to make something work better? We do. Well, we help to increase ordering accuracy. And you can just go down this list of common areas of improvements and say, well, does the enterprise software that I sell help to make something easier, help to decrease time? Yes, we decrease time spent ordering. Do we help to increase income, revenue, decrease cost, improve visibility? Yes, we improve visibility with our dashboard. We improve visibility to real-time information. So 2 ways to go about brainstorming benefits there. And you can apply either of those steps to what you sell to figure out how you can answer the question of what's in it for me for the prospects that you're interacting with. So now I want to take you to a more advanced way to think about your value points and how to answer what's in it for me for your prospects. This is advanced. You can skip this, but at the end of the day, your goal is to think about 3 to 6 different benefits, value points, right? But when you sell enterprise software, you can get much more sophisticated in this area by breaking down the benefits and the value points into 3 levels. Let me show you. Level 1 is technical value. And this is how your product or service helps to improve processes and systems and people, make things work better. When you deliver technical improvements, that usually creates business improvements such as revenue and costs and improve the delivery of their services. And when you provide business value, that can often create personal value for the actual buyer or executive that you're selling to. And it can help them to improve their income and hit their objectives and improve their career. So what you can do is you can break your benefits down into these 3 levels. And why this is helpful is that when you often sell software, you can often get hung up in the technical area. And even if you get sophisticated to where you don't just talk about the product, but you're talking about improvements, you can often talk about automating this and then streamlining that. And that's great. But what you can often forget is how does that impact the business? Because it's often the business improvements that can get projects funded and can close deals. When you communicate communicate how you can decrease costs or increase revenue, that's really where you take your game to the next level. So dividing value into these three levels can help you to become more sophisticated and not forget to communicate that business value. And that can put you ahead of the competition. If your competitors out there just talking about technical value and you come in really presenting a case of business value of how you can increase revenue and decrease costs, that's how you can win business. And that can be a key with helping you to successfully sell enterprise software. Now let's actually go back to the subject of brainstorming benefits, because the three benefits that we have so far are all technical benefits, technical value points. And I want to show you a process that you can use to brainstorm business benefits and business value points. And here's the trick, is that if our goal is to think about business value points, we can start with those technical value points that we just came up with. And for each technical value point, there's often a business improvement that's created. For example, when we help to decrease the time spent ordering, that can help a business to decrease the people they have walking around processing orders every day. So that can help to decrease staffing and labor costs. Again, this is how you communicate in a much more sophisticated level. When we help to increase ordering accuracy, that can help to decrease inventory costs because we're not wasting money on over ordering or not running out with shortages and not purchasing enough. When we improve the visibility to information, we help the executives that we're selling to make better decisions and improve decision making. So these are business improvements. And if you can see that both of these sets of value points are important to talk about and to communicate, but it's these business improvements that can really help to take your deals to the next level. And if we want to continue to work through those levels and think about personal value points for your buyer that you're selling to, we can start with those business improvements and think about, well, when we help them to decrease costs, how does that help? When we help to decrease the time it takes to process orders and decrease those staffing and labor costs, how does that help? Well, if your buyer is the one maybe walking around reviewing and processing orders every night, and you can automate that, you could help them to improve their work-life balance, help them to get home and have dinner with their family. If you decrease inventory costs, that helps the executive you're selling to hit their objectives and their bonuses. If you improve decision-making, that can help your executive to get promoted and get more recognition. So now you're creating these really compelling reasons why, in terms of what's in it for me, for that actual buyer, in terms of their personal life and what their personal gain is. And these are all very helpful things to talk about, whether that's in your email, your voicemail, your cold call, when you're in appointments. These are all very helpful things to talk about to make the prospect interested. What we've talked about so far is communicating the future of how we're going to improve things and make things better. We can also come at that from the other side of focusing on pain points, talking about what the prospect might be having challenges with, by talking about what the prospect might be having challenges with or might be having concerns about. So this is about coming at it from the other side. One side is talking about how you're going to make things better and improvements. The other side is talking about how things aren't good and aren't working well. And that is focusing on pain. And in the same way that there are three levels of improvements that you can deliver, there are often three levels of pain that your prospect might be, specifically when you sell enterprise software. So there might be technical pain where processes or systems or people aren't working well. And when there's technical pain, that can often work its way up to create business pain. So if there are manual processes, that means that cost might be higher, labor costs might be higher. And when there's business pain, there's often personal pain. So if things aren't working well, then your prospect might be worried about their job. They might not be hitting their bonuses. It might just be a stressful, unpleasant environment to work in. And so in the same way that we brainstormed value points, we can use a similar process for brainstorming pain points, because it's one thing to know, okay, I sell enterprise software, so I should be looking for pain points and talking about pain points. But you can have that awareness, but not know what pain points to talk about or what pain points to look for. So this process that we're going to show you here makes it very clear what pain points to be talking about with prospects. When you talk about these, this can help with our goal of trying to make prospects interested in the software that we sell. And so if our goal is to try to think about what technical pain points should we be looking for the software that we sell, well, here's a tip. You can start with looking at your technical value points. So remember, these are those three technical value points that we came up with. And what you can do is, for each way that you make things work better, there's often a pain point that decreases or goes away, or that is there that will be solved. So when you decrease the time spent ordering, a pain point that you might help to solve is that it's time consuming processing orders. When you improve ordering accuracy, a pain point might be that it's easy to make errors when ordering. When you improve visibility to real-time information, a pain point is that it's difficult to get a real-time view of orders and inventory. These are all basically the opposite. So you can look at the improvement and say, well, what's the opposite of that? And that can help you to create a good list of technical pain points. And we can continue with this process thinking about business pain points. And what we can do is we can start with those technical pain points that we just came up with. And for each technical pain point, you can then say, well, how does that impact the business? So when it's time consuming submitting orders, that means that there's a lot of labor spent on placing orders and labor costs. When it's easy to make errors, then the business pain point is that ordering errors are costly and impact profitability. When it's difficult to view orders and inventory, the business pain point is that it's difficult to make decisions without visibility. So we use our technical pain to think about, okay, well, what are the business pain points that we can help to make go away or that we should be looking for? And you can take that process one step further to think about personal pain points. And for each business pain point, you can think about, well, how does that impact the buyer that I'm trying to sell to? Well, if there's a lot of labor spent on placing orders, maybe if the buyer you're talking to is the one spending a lot of time and working late on orders, then they're having to work late and submit and review orders every night, not able to spend time with their family. If errors are costly, then maybe the person you're selling to isn't able to consistently hit their bonuses because of errors in the orders and their costs. If it's difficult to make decisions, you could say, well, maybe they're not getting enough recognition or career advancement. So continuing to think about how do these business pain points or technical pain points impact the person that I'm trying to sell to. And this is just a step-by-step process that you can apply to your product or your software to think about, these are pain points that I should be looking for and I can be talking about in my emails, in my cold calls, in my voicemails, in my appointments, in my presentations to try to make the prospect interested in the software that I sell. Now, what we just went through there, we basically brainstormed a bunch of talk tracks and talking points, and you can put those together to create what we call building blocks. In the full 2 to 3 day workshop, you'll hear us use the term building blocks a lot because what we help you to do is build your sales message into building blocks, and then you can use those building blocks in all different areas, whether it's your emails or cold calls or appointments or presentations. So what we just came up with is we came up with a value points building block of we help businesses to improve all of these different things. And we came up with a pain points building block, which is a lot of businesses that we work with are concerned about all of these different areas, and we help with all those different areas. So now you have those two building blocks to use in your messaging and use in your communications and to use to make prospects more interested in what you sell. And that will be much more helpful at communicating what's in it for me to your prospects instead of just talking about your product or software. All right, so getting back to this process here. So let's assume that we've gotten connected, we're engaged in some way, we're starting to make the prospect interested. And now it's critical to try to extract information from the prospect and learn about the prospect. And so it's my core belief that I believe the best salesperson is the one that asks the best questions. And so the best way to extract information is to simply ask good questions. And I think it's probably very reasonable for most people to agree with that. But you could agree that, okay, it's good to ask good questions, but I still don't know what questions to ask. Well, I'm going to provide a process here that will make it crystal clear for you what questions to ask. So let's brainstorm what I call pain questions. We just talked about pain points. For each pain point, there's often one or two questions that could be asked to figure out, does the prospect have that pain or are they concerned about that area? So if we start with trying to think about what technical pain questions could we ask for? If our enterprise software fixes these technical pain points, then let's ask some technical pain questions. And what we can do here is we can start with the technical pain points that we just came up with. If these are 3 good pain points, then let's think about for each pain point a question that we can ask. So if submitting orders is time consuming, how do you feel about the amount of time spent ordering? If it's easy to make errors, how concerned are you about order errors? If it's difficult to view review orders and inventory, how important is it for you to improve the visibility across orders and inventory? They might be doing good in these areas. And if they are, that's very important for you to know, because it would be difficult maybe for you to sell your enterprise software. So you want to find out how they're doing in these areas. And the best way to do that is by asking technical pain questions. And we can take that process to the next level to think about business pain questions. And it starts with looking at the business pain points that we just came up with. If there can often be a lot of labor spent on ordering, how important is it for you to decrease labor costs? If ordering errors are costly, how concerned are you about the cost of order errors? If it's difficult to make good decisions without being able to view orders and inventory, how do you feel about your visibility across orders and inventory? So again, these examples probably don't apply to what you sell, but what you can do is you can use this process to come up with your own business pain questions and technical pain questions. And we can use the same process to think about personal pain questions, starting with the personal pain points. You can help to fix the problem of people working late to submit and review orders. How often do you have to work late to review and submit orders? If bonuses could be impacted, how concerned are you about order errors impacting your bonuses? If not getting enough recognition and career advancement is something you can help with, how important is it for you to get more recognition and career advancement? So again, the step-by-step process helping you to figure out the best questions that you can be asking. These are great cold call questions, great first appointment questions. And everything we just talked about there, I call pain questions. There's another category of questions that I think are important to ask when selling anything, but especially when selling enterprise software, and I call those current state questions. These are questions that figure out what's going on in the area where you have something to offer. So just an oversimplified example is if you sold cars, current state questions to a prospect would be, do you have a car today? What are you currently driving? What year is it? How is it running? How often do you usually buy cars? How much money do you owe on it? Or do you lease it or do you own it? How many family members do you have? How many miles do you drive per year? So those are all questions that help you to learn about what's going on with the prospect. And that's very important information for you to figure out, does your product fit well, or to figure out what product that you sell would fit best. So I can't tell you what current state questions you should ask for your product. These are going to be different for every salesperson and every product. But what I can do is provide this process here where there are common areas to ask about for just about every product or service. And so here's some very common areas to ask about. And for each of these areas, you might want to think about, is there a question that you should be asking to organize the current state questions that you should ask? And so it's very important to ask if the prospect currently has something in place of what you sell. Are they currently using something today? So just staying with the same example here, are you currently using inventory management software? Maybe they're doing it completely manual. Maybe they have a product from a competitor. Maybe they've developed some in-house solution. So this is a very important question to ask. You also want to find out what the current vendor or provider is in the area where you have something to sell. Who are you using for inventory management software? Certainly you want to ask about current systems and processes. What type of software are you currently using for inventory management? You might want to learn about people in the organization. Who is responsible for inventory management? Current contracts. When does your current agreement expire? There are usually different types of sizing details that you might want to find out, how many sites or people or systems. So a question for this example might be, how much are you ordering per day? You might want to ask about the current performance or stats in the area where you have something to offer. So an example here is, what's your order error rate? And you might want to ask the last time they looked at other options in the area where you have something to offer. So when was the last time you considered updating your inventory management software? So again, just examples there, but use that process to organize your own current state questions. And that process there helps us to create two more building blocks. And the first one being pain questions. These are great questions to ask, like I said, on cold calls or appointments, as well as current state questions. And so that gives you more stuff to talk about as in your effort to sell your software. Okay, and moving on to the next step in the process is to qualify the prospect. So to pick back up on what we just talked about asking a lot of pain questions and current state questions. Those actually do help to qualify the prospect. I consider those to be pre-qualifying questions. Those questions will help you to figure out, does it even make sense for us to talk? Does it even make sense for us to schedule an appointment? When you sell enterprise software, you need to take that effort to the next level to ask more questions to fully qualify the prospect, especially if you're going to spend months with this prospect and spend money and time traveling and presenting and demonstrating. So here is a step-by-step process to fully qualify the prospect to determine, is the deal for real? Is this someone worth me spending my time? And separate the good prospects from bad. So with our approach to qualifying, we separate the areas that you want to measure into 4 different areas. So there's the need to purchase, the ability to purchase, the authority to purchase, and the intent to purchase. So let's just go through these one at a time, starting with the first one of need to purchase. This is an effort to look at, does the prospect truly need my enterprise software and need what I sell, or is it more of a want? For example, let's say that the prospect has a competitor's product that they purchased 3 years ago. And let's say that your inventory management software is definitely better. The latest version has better features and whatnot. But let's say that the competitor's product is pretty good. It's working. Certainly it could be better. The prospect may be very interested in learning about your software and invite you out to spend a full day with them and might be able to get a full room of people to look at your latest version. But do they truly need what you sell? If they just purchased the competitor's product 3 or 4 years ago and spent millions of dollars on that, they may love what you sell and be very interested, but it could be more of a want than truly needing what you sell. Compare that to another example where someone has a lot of manual processes and they don't have any inventory management software, or maybe some in-house system that was built 20 years ago that breaks all the time. Well, they definitely probably need what you sell because there's all sorts of problems. So it's important to identify, does the prospect need what I sell? Now, I'm not saying that you can't sell to someone who has more of a want, but you just might be more cautious of the amount of time you spend with someone when you identify that things are okay and yes, they like what you sell, but it's more of a want. So you keep those conversations going, but you want to identify, does the prospect and company truly need what I sell, or is it more of a want? So the key way to find that out is, and here we have 4 more building blocks, by the way, but the first building block is need to purchase questions. So here are some questions that you can ask to separate good prospects from bad. What motivated you to look at us or brought you to us? So let's say that your prospect was an inbound lead. They went to your website, filled out a form, and that lead came to you. And now you're engaged with them, you're on the phone with them, or you're in an appointment with them. Ask them what motivated them to look at you. Their answer to this could be, I was tasked to do some research, or the answer could be, well, our current system is being discontinued. Whatever the answer is to this, it could be very valuable information. Do you mind if I ask why you took time out of your schedule to meet with us? This is a good question to ask. Maybe you had a lead generation SDR schedule an appointment for you, and now you're going out and you're meeting with that prospect. You might want to find out why they took the meeting. This might help you to uncover information that you aren't aware of. Maybe it's because the SDR hassled them and wouldn't get off the phone with them, or maybe it's because they tell you, well, we're in the early stages of evaluating new software vendors. What improvements could you see if you make this purchase? So this is a good question to ask after they've learned about your product. Ask them, well, how will this help you? I mean, certainly you can answer that question about improvements, but get them to tell you in their own words. If they can't answer this question, then it might not be a truly qualified lead. What will happen if you do not purchase something? So this is a great question to ask. I mean, if you ask this to the vendor, to the prospect that purchased something 3 years ago, things are going to be okay. But if you ask this to the prospect who has the homegrown system built 20 years ago, they might share a bunch of problems and additional cost that happens if they don't do anything. Is there a date when you need this purchase to be made by? What happens if the purchase isn't made by that date? What time frame are you trying to work against? So those are just some brief questions to ask to figure out, is the deal for real? Moving on to the next category here of ability to purchase. This refers to the prospect or the company that you're talking to. Do they have the ability to purchase the software that you're trying to sell? Going back to the car example, let's say someone drives a very old car that breaks down all the time. Well, they definitely need what you sell. But let's say that individual is not employed and doesn't have any income or money. Well, they need what you sell, but they don't have the ability to purchase what you sell. If you convert that to B2B sales and enterprise software, a company could definitely need your software and love your software. But if they don't have any budget and no plans to have budget in the near future, then they don't have the ability to purchase. There's actually a couple scenarios. There's an inability to purchase in the short term, which means that the prospect might not have budget available to purchase your product. And then there might be more of a long-term problem where the prospect has serious financial problems and will never have the ability to purchase. If it's a long-term problem, you want to be extremely cautious and sort of not spend any time with the prospect. But if the prospect's ability to purchase is more short-term, then you just want to be a little cautious, and focus more on planting seeds for the future. For example, you want to position yourself so that you're more engaged in the budget planning process and more aligned with the budgeting timelines of budget planning and budgets opening back up. So being more aware of where the prospect is in terms of their ability to purchase will help you to figure out how to deal with the prospect, what process to take them through, how much time to spend with them. But certainly if you can figure out that the prospect has the money to spend and the project is funded, that's great to find out as well. And so here are some ability to purchase questions that you can ask. I like to ask, instead of, do you have money or how much money do you have to spend? I like to ask, what is the range that you need your budget to stay within? Is there a budget approved for this project? Have the funds been allocated to this project? What budget will this purchase be made under? Are there other purchases that this funding may end up being used for? How does this project fit with other initiatives from a priority standpoint? All right, the next area is authority to purchase. And this is figuring out how much authority does the person that you're working with and talking to, how much authority do they have in terms of being the decision maker? And so what you find out here can help you, because certainly if you find out that the person you're dealing with is the decision maker, that's great. If you find out that they're not, that's important to find out. I'm not saying that you can't continue to move forward, but finding out that they're not can help you to identify that you need to take steps to find out who is the decision maker and get them more involved. But here are some questions to figure out how much authority your prospect has. What is the decision-making process? So I like this instead of asking, are you the decision maker? So if you ask, are you the decision maker? They might just say yes because they think they are or because they want you to think they are. But I like to ask, what's the decision-making process? They may say, okay, well, I make the decision, yes or no. Okay, what happens next? Well, after that, this. Okay, then what happens next? And just mapping out that process, you'll identify who the decision maker is. What parties will be involved in making the decision? What are the key factors that a decision will be based on? What functional areas or departments will be impacted by the purchase? Is there a committee that this needs to go through? Who's the ultimate decision maker? Who is the person that will sign the contract? So some questions that help you there. The last category is something that can often be overlooked, and this is the intent to purchase. So a prospect may have a need, may have the ability in terms of funding, maybe have the authority to go ahead and purchase, and you may be talking to someone, but they don't have the intent to purchase from you. I'll give you a very simple example using the car example. Let's say that someone has been researching a particular vehicle, spent all weekend at another dealership, and has built up a friendship with that other salesperson, has already negotiated a price. Before they said yes, they wanted just to see if their negotiated price was good. So they went to another dealership and talking to a new salesperson. That salesperson identifies that they look good in all these areas of need, ability, and authority. So that other salesperson thinks that they're going to sell a car today. But what they're not aware of is that the intent of the prospect is to purchase with the dealership that they've spent all weekend with and where they have all that rapport and relationship with. So in this case, that prospect did not have the intent to purchase. This is something that, like I said, can be overlooked, but we can help to identify that by asking some questions, which are, what other options are you considering? How far along are you in discussions with them? How do you feel about your other options? What do you like about them? What do you not like? How do they compare to us? Is there a reason why you would choose us? If you had to make a decision today, which way would you lean? Now, I'm not going to say that you can't sell to someone that has the intent to purchase from someone else, but when you identify that they do, this can help you to make some very quick decisions, like going straight to your best and final price instead of negotiating. You can also try to minimize how much time you spend on this. So don't spend a whole week on a proposal. Use a boilerplate template and just send out your best and final price. So just some tips there on helping you to qualify the prospect. Now let's talk about a sales process that you can go through, because if you just take all the tips I've given you so far, it might be complicated figuring out, well, how am I going to have the time to ask all these questions, and when should I ask that, and when should I talk about this? So I'm going to provide you with a structured step-by-step sales process that you can use when selling enterprise software, and that can help you to figure out when to do all the things that we just talked about. Now, I personally believe that there are three main steps that you can go through, really regardless what you sell, but especially you can use these steps for selling software software. But there are three main early sales process steps that you can go through. And it starts with an initial contact. This is the first time you're really communicating and interacting with the prospect. Could be a cold call, could be a cold email, could be talking to someone at a networking event. And then I believe you should progress to some sort of more established conversation. This could be an appointment, could be talking in more detail, and then you should progress to some sort of explanation step. We actually refer these three steps as the ICE sales process. And what I'll do real quickly is I'll go through each of these steps and talk about some of the key things that you should do in each step. And then you can apply that to selling enterprise software. So if we start with the initial contact, like I said, this is the first time you're talking to someone. Could be an inbound call, could be communicating with someone on a website chat, social media. What your goals are in this first conversation are really just trying to determine, does it even make sense for us to talk? So you want to build a little bit of interest, pre-qualify a little bit. And the close is not to sell the product, is to close for just simply talking more. Now, the structure for the initial contact, this is just a very quick, brief conversation, 2 to 5 minutes. And what I recommend is you spend 80% of the initial contact on the prospect and 20% on you, just enough about you so that they're interested in talking more. And the questions that you can ask in this step are pain questions and current state questions. So those are the only questions you need to worry about at this point. Like I said, the close in the initial contact is for the conversation. And so this is where you're simply talking more. And it could be an appointment, online meeting, extended cold call, talking at an event. And your goals of the conversation are still really not to sell the product. This is where you want to qualify. So we were just talking about qualifying the prospect. This is where you're in gathering more information about the prospect. You, of course, want to build more interest. And the close is not for selling the product. The close is for selling the explanation step of the sales process, which is the next step. And the structure of the conversation could be 10 to 60 minutes. And at this point, it's half on the prospect, half on you. And now the questions that you could ask pain questions, current state questions, desired state, organization, and qualifying questions. When you close the prospect in the conversation for the explanation step, this is where you are going to present or demonstrate your software. So this could be a presentation, demonstration, and this is where you are trying to build interest in the prospect buying what you sell. The close at this point could be trying to close the prospect on purchasing your software. Of course, with enterprise software, you might have long sales cycles, and the close might not actually be getting a signature in the explanation step, but you might want to close for actual validation on fit and interest in moving forward. And I'll talk about how to close coming up. The structure for the explanation step could be anything between 30 minutes to 2 hours. At this point, it's 20% of the attention is on the prospect and 80% on you. So you're still keeping the conversation a little bit on the prospect, but now it's really, this is how we can help. And you still might want to ask more questions. You can ask all of the same questions that you could ask in the conversation step that you didn't get a chance to ask. But that is the sales process. And that is how to organize your cold calling, your cold emailing, your appointments, and your presentation and demonstration. So that being the case, now let's talk about how to organize your presentation and demonstration when selling enterprise software. And so if I go back to what we just talked about here, and I just want to point out one thing that I already discussed, which is 20% on the prospect, 80% on you. A way that I like to do that when selling enterprise software is the very beginning of the presentation, I make more about the prospect. This is what we've learned about you. And then it's the 80%. This is how we can help you and to help you to solve those problems. And so here's a good way to use the building blocks that we've already provided, in that you could start out the beginning by talking about the prospect, by talking about pain points. So if you've used the process that we've already discussed to extract information from the prospect by asking pain questions, you could share that information back to them by opening up your presentation to say, from our previous discussions, we found that you have these challenges, and then you could confirm those. Are those challenges correct? Is there anything you want to add to that or change? So this is a great way to interact with the prospect at the beginning, maybe gather some more information or correct anything. And then after that, you can then share, here's how we can help you. And this is where you share your value points building block, which is what's in it for them, how the product that you sell and the features and the functionality will help them to improve things and decrease those challenges. Then you could progress to your product building block. This is where you can start to more talk about what you sell and demonstrate what you sell. So This is how we deliver those improvements. We provide inventory management software, and it does this and it does that. You want to communicate how you're different from other providers, other solutions, maybe how you're different from the status quo. Some ways we differ from other options is this. You might want to communicate some bragging points or important details about your company or your product. Then you could close the presentation or demonstration by sharing a name drop example. This is a case study example of someone else that you've helped. So we worked with a computer manufacturer, and they were spending a lot of time on processing orders. We helped to solve that challenge by automating their ordering process with our software. This helped them to improve order accuracy and ultimately help them to decrease inventory costs. That is a way to deliver your presentation. Now let's wrap up by talking about how to close the prospect. And so I'm a firm believer in asking a lot of trial close questions. These are sort of test close questions. What do you think of what we've discussed so far? How does this fit with what you're needing? How would that feature help you? Is this something that you would use? Are we heading in the right direction? Is this what you were expecting to see? So I not only ask these towards the end of the sales process, but during presentations and demonstrations, every step of the way, I try to trial close. When you sell enterprise software, I personally think that you don't really typically hard close people, because especially if your software is expensive, you're not going to hard close and try to get someone to do an impulse purchase on $1 million purchase. So it's usually a win-win, good fit type of situation, and you're just trying to find the good fit. So with that, you can often do a soft close. What would you like to do next? What direction would you like to go from here? Do you want to continue talking about this? When would you like to talk again? What does the path forward look like? And then here are some hard close questions. Are you ready to move forward? What would you need to make a commitment? If you had everything you want, are you ready to move forward? When are you going to make your final decision? Now, one of the most helpful tools, I think, for closing when you sell enterprise software is this tool right here, which is called a partnership plan. It sounds sophisticated, but it's really just a table, and every row is a step that needs to be completed between today and your customer going live or your customer purchasing. And every step, you basically have a due date, and you have an owner, and you have a status. And so what you do as a salesperson, when you're about to give a proposal or a presentation, you take a first swing at creating the partnership plan. And so you think of all the different steps, not only steps for you as the salesperson and provider, but also steps for the buyer. And you try to think of everything, and you put this together. And then after you deliver your presentation or your demonstration or your proposal, you say something like this: if you'd like to keep moving forward, this is what our partnership plan looks like. These are some of the steps that need to be taken between now and you getting up and running. Based on what we discussed today, are you interested in moving forward with this plan? So you're basically not closing them on purchasing your product. You're closing them on moving forward and all these different steps. So it can be something very powerful. Now, the nice thing about this is that the prospect may agree to the whole plan and say, yes, it's a great fit, let's do it. But the prospect might not be able to commit at that particular time. If they're not able to commit to the whole plan, you can use this plan just to close for the next step. Say, okay, no problem at all. Do you have enough interest to move to the next step of this plan? So you could say, fair enough, no problem at all. The next step in this plan is a discovery meeting. Can we at least agree to do that? And you close for that and close for the date. Whether you close for the whole plan or just the next step, a great thing to do with the prospect is to build out the plan together, because you as a salesperson took the first swing, and these are all your thoughts and ideas. Get the prospect to participate by making any changes and additions. So then you could say something like, great, do the steps and time estimates look correct and acceptable to you? Do you have anything to add or change? And you can actually just modify this together and agree with the prospect to agree to the plan. All right, that is pretty much it. If you did like this training video and you got one or two tips and you want to return the favor, very easy for you to do. Simply like, comment, share this video, subscribe to our channel. Any of those help us, and none of those cost you anything. If that's interesting, but you still don't know what to do, you might want to check out my book, The Smart Sales System, Sell Smarter, Not Harder, and you can get that on Amazon here. That's pretty much it. If you have any questions, want more information, the best place to go is salescripter.com. There's plenty of more tips, ebooks for free to download, videos. If you have questions on our product, SalesScripter, there's plenty of product information. And if you want to contact us, there is certainly a contact us chat window or a phone number or email. You can contact us through our website. Thanks for being here. Hope this was helpful. We'll see you on the next one. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.